Donald brews a mean cup of tea as I sat and waited for the half-dozen leaves to turn the water a mild peat color. We talked of change. Donald's view is that life isn't what it used to be. I hadn't the heart to tell him that his lifestyle is probably the most unchanged in Britain. It's just that with each departing boat, there are fewer people to share it with. The population drops by 10% each year. Donald's never lived away from the island, but so great is the influence of immigration that he writes as if he had.
I've got a poem here which I wrote some years ago. It was picturing an emigrant, someone that emigrated from South Coast, standing on the shore of Canada. Well, Canada and South Coast are straight in line. You can take a B line in Canada. Well, I composed it as if the man was talking to the wave. The wave would maybe reach South Coast through time. If she missed the other island, well, she would going to hit some shore in Coast. So this is the way it is. Maricus to Elan East is the herders van de Hoorn. Bola to a klattig naakje, voor een beeldig wami oed. Nu je dikjes to een draaien, beganjach wane dat de cheese. Hier waardig toch halen, maar toch eigenlijk uit de chien. Nu de wami ook dan hawakad, het is met hawa, het is met hawa.
It would be hard to conceive of a simpler, more elemental beauty than that found in the Western Isles. Sky, hills, grass, and water. That's all there is. That's all that's necessary. It's a land stripped of ostentation, Britain at its most basic. A place where life is reflected in its people's needs, or more accurately, what they don't need. They don't need superstores or DIY chains or garden centers. What they have is a place where the shopping highlights come twice a year when the mail order catalogs land on the doormat. A place where you can communicate without the need of a mobile phone or fax. A place where choir practice takes precedence over Coronation Street. A place as far away from the concrete and glass of Milton Keynes City as Morecambe now is from Wise. I don't know what they were singing about, but I don't need to know. Britain would be a much poorer place if this tongue ever were to sing its final note. Four 402 islands make up Great Britain, some small, some very small. And no matter how small and remote, they all contribute to what is unique, the British character. However, there's a certain irony in the thought that a place that preserves the virtues that most people long for is a place where few people want to live. the thousands of things that I've never understood, one in particular stands out. That's the question of who was the first person who stood on a pile of sand and said, you know, if we took some of this and mixed it with a little potash and heated it, we could make a material that would be solid and yet transparent. We could call it glass. Call me obtuse, but you could stand me on the beach till the end of time, and never would it occur to me to try to make it into windows. I mention this here merely to make the point that I don't know much about technology. I mean, I don't know the difference between iron and steel. And please don't write because I don't want to know. But I do know that if you're good at technology, you'll rule the world. And nobody in history has dominated technology like Britain did for about a century and a half. In 1775, an enterprising architect named Thomas Pritchard designed the world's first iron bridge and built it here, which was an awfully handy thing because the town's called Iron Bridge. To call this period fruitful is the wildest understatement. Among the British inventions of that incredibly busy age were the spinning mule, flying shuttle, maritime chronometer, Portland cement, micrometer screw, theodolite, seed drill, steam engine, electrical telegraph, industrial dyes, vacuum flask, and the railway locomotive, to give a mere and random sampling. Much of that inventive outburst was centered here at Ironbridge in Shropshire, which markets itself as the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. Not a boast that would have me packing my bags and booking a seat on the next available plane, but evidently this is a minority view. Ironbridge is an exceedingly popular tourist attraction. Every year, some 300,000 people pay good money to come and wander around among old blast furnaces and the romantic ruins of historic chimneys, and to gaze at big mysterious pieces of machinery. This is a very early, very rare, double-action rotative steam engine. The way it works is this. Steam from the interocitor here powers this 9-foot piston, which drives both the transverse and vertical crankshafts. Together, these provide over 900 pounds per square inch of thrust to the syncopated cams by way of this very large circadian flywheel. Actually, I don't have the faintest idea what all these things do or how this works. But I can tell you one thing. It helped to make Britain rich. It's kind of hard to work out what it all was for. A century from now, I wonder what things people will be gawping at from our age. Insurance offices, supermarkets, multi-story car parks. And will they find them as alien and mystifying as many of today's visitors seem to find this stuff? I've no idea what this pile of scrap signifies, but I know it reminds me of something. Albran. In a sense, it hardly matters. The important thing is that for a crucial period, the British dominated technology and science in a way that no other nation in the modern age has. They not only devised hundreds and hundreds of ways to make things that the world had never dreamed of, but ways to make money from making those hundreds and hundreds of things. And now it's all been transformed into a kind of jolly old England, wasn't it fun working in the mills type of experience. Having said that, you do learn a fact or two. It's a giant vertical blowing engine. I may not understand science, but I can certainly appreciate the bulk of it. At the patent office in London, acres of shelves grown with the accumulated wisdom of decades of studious toil. It doesn't seem a very likely place to find amusement, but I can assure you that I have seldom passed a more diverting hour. If proof were ever needed that the British inventor is alive and well, or if not always well exactly, at least alive, here is where you'll find it. This is for a two-handed glove. A two-handed glove has two compartments. The glove is made of a suitable material and to a size which will accommodate two persons' hands, and a toothbrush that you wear on the end of your finger. comprises a sleeve to fit over a finger end and a number of bristles. It may be supplied in a package with a small quantity of toothpaste. Just what every traveler needs. From April 1974, a British invention that is impeccable in its attention to detail. It's for a photon push-pull radiation detector for use in chromatically selective cat flap control. This is, you understand, a nuclear cat flap with an integrated 1,000 megaton Earth orbital bomb for maintaining peace across the planet. It's from a man in Sussex. It has some detailed drawings, including one here which shows how by monitoring wave magnifications you can allow a ginger cat to pass through the cat flap, whereas the black cat from next door, when it's measured, is forbidden entry. There's a passage here which says, "When I showed Ginger my drawings, he was very impressed." "Purr, purr," said Ginger. "That's quite clever. I shall be able to get in to eat my food without worrying about Blackie from next door." "But," said Ginger, "there is a much better use for your sensitive radiation detector device. Think about this." We used to have a cat like that. I take it that sanity is not a precondition for filing a patent application, then?
No, it's not. All you need is some money to send in with your application. To be granted a patent, though, you have to meet certain criteria. It has to be novel, has to be not obvious, and so on.
What if I came in with a patent application for, say, a wooden device for exercising a dog and it was just a stick? Well, would you grant me a patent on that?
We're actually the patent office library, and people come here to actually research their invention, so you could come in here and check out whether it really was new.
So this isn't even the patent office. That's apparently somewhere else. Well, never mind. There's a lot of jolly useful information here. Shh. Sorry. Well, after extensive research, I've come up with what I think may be the most singular patent anywhere in this building. And I'm very proud to tell you it was filed by an American. And it's for a military-style helmet that incorporates in the crown a small bore cannon, which apparently when the user elevated his chin, it would automatically fire a projectile. It was invented by an Albert Pratt, who presumably also simultaneously invented whiplash. The library increases by 1 million inventions a year. Even so, there are some things you just can't register. You can't get a patent for graphic design, but if there's one British invention of the 20th century that deserves admiration, it's Harry Beck's classic underground map. What a piece of perfection it is. Beck was an out-of-work draftsman who became troubled by the bewildering complexity of existing underground maps, which had the appearance of a heap of assorted garden hoses. He saw, and what an intuitive stroke this was, that when you are underground, it doesn't matter where you are. As long as the stations are presented in their right sequence, he could freely distort scale. He gave his map the precision of an electrical wiring system by creating a new imaginary London, though even today the distortions can cause confusion. Here's an amusing trick you can play on people from abroad. Take them to Bank Station and ask them to make their way to Mansion House. They'd be likely to go from Bank Station to Tottenham Court Road along the Central Line, then down the Northern Line to Embankment, and then along the District or Circle Line to Mansion House. The fact that Mansion House and Bank are just 200 feet apart is ill-represented on the map. But London Transport got good value out of Beck. They paid him just 5 guineas, which would barely get you from one end of the Piccadilly line to the other these days. Beck's map has, of course, changed many times since he first made it. In the summer of 1931, just as he was completing the prototype, they decided to close Down Street Station, making a hole in the middle of his diagram and causing him, quite literally, to go back to the drawing board. Just because a station closes, it doesn't go away. The system is littered with what are called ghost stations, like Down Street, which sits forgotten under Mayfair. Jed Brown is the manager of nearby Green Park Station, but has the unusual additional duty of being responsible for a station that hasn't seen a passenger in almost 70 years, although it hasn't been entirely unused.
The cabinet used to hold meetings in 1940 here. The cabinet war rooms weren't complete, so they came down and borrowed our meeting room.
Sir Churchill was down here.
Yes, he used to use this as a gentleman's club, and he used to use our sleeping facilities.
The best part of underground travel is that you seldom actually see the places you go through. In other cities, station names are unimaginative and straightforward, but in London they sound sylvan and beckoning. Stamford Brook, Turnham Green, Bromley by Bow, Maida Vale. How many of these ghost stations are there?
On the Piccadilly line, there's just really the three. There's this one, York Way, and Brompton Road.
And altogether on the system, how many would you say?
In various different guises, I should imagine you've got maybe 20.
Are there any full-scale stations still in existence?
There's a good example at Aldwych, which is used for film sets and things like that. The trains don't run anymore. Trains don't run.
I think we missed that one, Jen.
I think you're right.
This is the tale of a man who had it all, including huge chunks of the coastline around Bournemouth. A man who spent his holidays in a fairy tale castle. When I was last here, Highcliffe Castle was little more than a burnt-out shell, its future uncertain. I wrote, "Today, Highcliffe's stately Gothic shell stands crowded by bungalows, an incongruous sight. I'd like to have known how the house had come to be in such a parlous and neglected state, but there was no one around." That was in 1994. Clearly, things have changed. The American who lived here was, for the first 50 or so years of his life, the very model of stern rectitude and Edwardian business acumen. But then his wife died, and he took up with a pair of Hungarian-American music hall performers, the Dolly sisters. Yes, both of them. And his lifestyle changed utterly.
He used to come down for holiday times and spend quite a lot of time down here, and any good story is enhanced in the telling.
So he was a bit of a confabulator.
I wouldn't like to be quoted on that. He loved the area. He bought land in Stampit in Christchurch, and he bought a lot of land in Bournemouth, Hengistbury Head, and going on into the centre of Bournemouth. And I believe that when he sold that, he bought it in 1929, sold it a year later, he had plans to build a magnificent palace. They didn't come to fruition.
Bob Nicholson gave up his job as a head teacher to help save Highcliffe. The American millionaire for whom this was his castle, albeit rented, would, I'm sure, have sorted it out much earlier, but for changed circumstances. He'd like to have stayed here forever. Instead, he lost everything. His Rolls Royces, his racehorses, his castle on the south coast, his London home, and his department store. So the man who gave the world the bargain basement, annual sales, gift certificates, who in short transformed the modern shopping experience, lost it all. Gordon Selfridge, self-made and self-destroyed. He ended up virtually penniless, living in a tiny bedsitter in Putney. And every day for the rest of his life, he got on a bus and came here to this corner, outside his department store, and stood and just looked. But he had had the inestimable pleasure of bonking twin sisters, which is, of course, the main thing. In a street a few hundred yards away, a less distinguishable monument, a brass plaque, blank from a century of care. In America, it being illegible, it would long ago have been replaced. But here history is allowed to pile up. And if you needed proof of that, you could hardly do better than this corner of the city of London. But just here you have the house where John Wesley founded Methodism. And directly across the road, in the little-known cemetery called Bunhill Fields, you have a whole galaxy of significant British figures, including just here Richard Price,
the man who invented life insurance.
And Mrs. Price, who presumably became the first widow to benefit from a life insurance payout. The Bunhill Fields graveyard is a strange and beguiling place, now overlooked by the great mass of scurrying passers-by. It was London's first nonconformist burial ground, and as such it attracted a wide range of talent. John Bunyan, Isaac Watts, the creator of many of the best-known English hymns, the families of Oliver Cromwell and John Wesley, and many others.
William Blake? Daniel Defoe. Wonder if he was buried on Friday.
Despite the gravestones, it's often only a guess as to where everyone is. Hitler's Luftwaffe totally rearranged the layout during the Blitz.
And all in the space of a 60-second shortcut from City Road to Bunhill Row. And it doesn't stop there, because somewhere on this road, Milton wrote Paradise Lost.
Not much paradise here today. If Bunhill represents a fine collection of yesterday's worthies, then Oxford, city of the dreaming spires, could be said to represent tomorrow's. There's a certain obvious cachet about going up to Oxford. It and its light blue cousin Cambridge reign supreme as the target of intellectual achievement. It's fair to say that a number of its students have gone beyond the pale in an effort to stand out, a point I made to Helen Eastman, president of the union.
If you're coming from Oxford, you know you're following in this tradition of all sorts of exciting and famous people that have ended up coming out of Oxford. So there's always this feeling that you've got to do something different, you've got to do something exciting with your life. And Oxford obviously breeds characters. There's an awful lot of unusual and very intelligent people here. There are also an awful lot of very, very normal students as well who are just getting on with a normal university education. But obviously there are characters as you get in any academic hothouse, I suppose. And there are all sorts of unusual societies and all sorts of unusual things.
Like the Nude Poets Society, for instance. There's no evidence to suggest that the city's most famous son ever disrobed or read poetry in public. He didn't even attend university. William Morris left school at 15 to become a bike mechanic, and eventually Lord Nuffield. The son of a tenant farmer, he once observed that the value of education was not what you put into a man, but what you got out.